As the parsha begins, we find that Yaakov has run away. He's running for his life, and he's running because his parents told him to leave. His mother knows about Esau's plan to kill him, while his father tells him to go because he needs to find a proper wife. And Yaakov leaves. At this point, we really don't know that much about Yaakov. Yes, we know things that he's done, but how much do we know about his inner world? How much do we know about his hopes, his dreams? How much do we know about his religious personality? The person that we met, and we really saw only two scenes. One scene is where his brother comes in hungry from the field, and he offers him food for the birthright, which is arguably not the way that any of us would raise our children to behave towards their siblings. The other thing that we know about him is when he's put in an impossible situation when his mother commands him to dress up as his brother, to go in and to fool his father, to take the blessing that his father wants to give to his brother, which again is an impossible situation. But what do we know about him? Yaakov runs away. He lays down that night, he falls asleep, and he dreams of angels. He dreams of things which are spiritual. He sees the angels going up and going down. Now, it's possible that this is an epiphany. It's possible that this is a prophecy. But maybe this does tell us something about Yaakov. Actually, it certainly tells us something about Yaakov. Because it either is something that he dreams about, or something which God reveals to him, which means that God speaks to him, which is actually what happens immediately afterwards. God tells him the land that he's lying on will be his, and God promises to take care of him. When Yaakov awakens, we find that he himself feels somewhat undeserving. And he prays God to take care of him. And he promises that he will do something for God, and that itself is interesting. You know, it's possible that every single one of us has a place deep inside of us that we're willing to do for God. And what I mean by that is that there's a place that we hold, or perhaps there's something that we think that we should do, that we're willing to promise to God. That tells us a bit about who we are. It also tells us about ourselves in the sense that sometimes we need some type of an event in order to do that thing. God forbid if somebody is sick and then we turn to God, oh, I promise I'll do this thing if we try to make deals with God. And Yaakov here does make a deal with God. He asks for the minimum in terms of this worldly things. Food on his plate, clothing on his back. And he didn't ask for designer clothing. Just simple necessities. And he says if this happens, and he comes back, he will build a house for God. Which tells us that Yaakov is attuned to spirituality. It's not just the angels he sees going up and going down. It's this understanding of a house of God. Perhaps this is a response to God promising to Yaakov that the land of Israel, which perhaps we can understand as being God's home, has been given to him. It's as if Yaakov is responding and saying, you're going to let me live in your home. I will build a home for you. I recognize holiness. And as I said, that tells us something about Yaakov's inner world. It tells us something about who he is. But Yaakov also sees the angels going up and the angels going down. And he understands that there are those who will have good days and those who will have bad days. And Yaakov's going to have many difficult days in front of him. He's leaving his father's home. He's leaving the land of Israel. He's going off to, in a certain sense, the unknown. And all he asks is the minimum. And he has this sense of holiness. And he wants to come back. And he wants to build a house for God. It's interesting because there are those who understand that the background of the entire argument between Yaakov and Esau was about who would serve as the firstborn. Who would serve in a temple. And perhaps some will see this as being anachronistic. What temple? There was no temple. Well, lo and behold, Yaakov is speaking about a temple. If we know the Haftorah that we read last week, the part of the prophets that we read, it went from discussing Yaakov and Esau to speaking about the Kohanim who would serve in the temple. Maybe even there's a certain echo over here of the first brothers who didn't get along, which of course Cain and Hevel. And they don't get along right after each of them, in fact, brought offerings. And God accepted the offering of one. Maybe Esau was unwilling to be that type of child who saw himself as being completely unworthy, the type of child who would have his offerings rejected by God. Perhaps he didn't want to become a Cain. But it's interesting, because Cain kills Abel, Cain kills Hevel, just as Esav swears that he would kill his brother Yaakov. But what's also interesting is that when Cain kills Abel, it's Cain who's then punished by going off into exile. Over here, Yaakov is forced to go off into exile. So an echo of those original brothers who didn't get along and it ended in bloodshed is staring at us. And instead of exile as a response to murder, here the exile takes place in order to avoid murder. And that murder is avoided. Yaakov leaves, has a very difficult life, will one day meet up his brother again. And he will come back to the land of Israel and come back to his father's home. As far as the house of God, what's interesting is that when that temple will be built, it will be destroyed. Angels going up and angels going down. Even the angels have their day, and the angels have bad days. The Jewish people will have their day, and they have had bad days. And the temple was destroyed once from people who lived around the area that he ran away to Lavan. And the temple was destroyed a second time by descendants of what we understand to be Edom from Rome, people who the Talmud understands came from the family of his brother Esav. The angels go up and the angels go down, and Yaakov understands that he will leave and he will come back. Temples will be built and temples will be destroyed. The Jewish people will go into exile, but one day they'll come back.